ping this out soon afterwards. There's going to be a whole bunch of questions, but this is a closed webinar in terms of we can't interact with you verbally, but if you have a question, put it in the chat box in the Q&A, and we will try to answer whatever questions during the session. The likelihood is we'll cover it during the demo. If there's still some questions left over, then I will email out some answers to everybody. So it's all good. So do you want to start some, there's a couple of PowerPoint slides, and then after that, it's going to be fully interactive with John. So do you want to hit the go button there, John? So look, those of you that are on the call, you have been invited personally by ourselves or from distributors. So you should know BrightSign pretty well. But I like to bring up this slide just to remind everybody that we are the market leaders, and we're still the market leaders, and we have been since 2013. And we have over 2 million players now on the market. And yeah, the reason why we remain strong in the market is we innovate and we have these new types of products. We're now fully into the Series 5. And for those of you that know us, that we are, seriously robust, and we've got lots more tools coming along. So thank you very much for sticking by us. And yeah, it's all good. Next slide, please, John. So as I said, Series 5, this is all coming in now, spring, summer. Pretty much everything is kind of on the manufacturing board now. We will cover other webinars with other scenarios, but right now we just want to concentrate on that XC5 because it is something that is very, very new to BrightSign. It's new to the market. And there's nothing else that we've seen out there that will give you a digital signage platform that is going to control video walls. There's just nothing on the market. So we wanted to kind of give you a very, very good overview of what we can achieve with this player. Let's go, John. So some key things that you would have seen on our documentation anyway, but we've really enhanced everything in this player. The HTML5 performance is second to none. We've really been trying to attack that PC market, and we've done that excellently with this player. And we will show some examples towards the end of this session that addresses that. But it's the video walls which is the key for us. Lots of you out on the market, you do lots of video walls. There's lots of advantages from having one single piece of hardware to drive that video wall. We can keep the cost down. Also, the license cost is very, very easy to manage. So it's not just the hardware. There's a lot of monetary values that you can take advantage of here. And we'll cover those on a different session, but just wanted to kind of paint that picture. And we are the first to market with an 8K rendering station on there. So we'll go into that in a little bit more detail. And as usual, we're very, very good in the design. We're very, very robust. Scalability and reliability, you always get that with BrightSign. So it's more of the same. But in terms of technology, this is the best thing that you're going to see on the market. And here it is. So you can see from the back that we still have the same ports that we do on the other players. So you can still do all that interactivity for the serial ports, the GPIOs with the contact closures, full Wi-Fi. And if we spin around to the front again, I don't know if we can do that, John, but you'll see it's got the 4 HDMI sockets in there as well. If you use one of the sockets, you're going to get the full 8K experience, or you can get 4 4Ks over the 4 HDMI plugs. So it's it's a bit of an engine in there. I can hear you tinkering there, John. Are you ready?
Yeah. So what I'd like to do now is start going into some example experiences. So we're going to do something a little bit different today. We're going to go through a couple different scenarios that I think are really interesting. Ways that you can use the XC5 for different types of experiences. And we're going to go through an actual space, an actual virtual space here, and show you a number of different builds using the XC5. We're going to do this live, so hopefully no technical difficulties. We'll just cross our fingers and make sure everything works right here. But I want to go through different examples of ways that you can build content with the player. Using different screens and different resolutions, different mediums of content, just to give you some ideas. And for this, we're going to be using our authoring software, BrightAuthor Connected. And I'm just using this really to demonstrate it. So we have a huge partnership with lots of CMS partners that are integrating with this product as well. So really, this is about giving you some ideas and some inspiration of what's possible. So we're going to go really simple at first, and I'm actually going to build. I'm actually going to show you what this workflow looks like, what the process is, and we're going to start simple. So what I want to do right out of the gates here is start with one of the first, important features of the XC5 is that you can operate it on a single screen and you can go up to 8K resolution. So that in and of itself has a lot of creative potential, a lot of possibilities. And then we're going to build from there. We're going to start going into some multi-screen example builds, video wall applications, and then finally at the end, we're going to do a interactive retail experience, which is also multi-screen. So should be interesting. So with that, let's actually go into this first example here. So I want to show you guys a single screen 8K build. Now, for the sake of the Zoom demonstration, I don't want to know what it looks like to try to actually create 8K content and publish it over a webinar. So we will have to go with HD for the purposes of today. But when you're working with our software, everything obviously is centered around this concept of building a presentation. So we're going to go ahead and start a new presentation. We're going to choose the XC4055. And of course, we're going to choose a location for where we want to save this presentation. So we're going to go ahead and give this a name, 8K single screen. And this is where I want to introduce the workflow, specifically for Bright Author Connected. If you haven't seen it before, or even if you have used it before, this is a little bit different workflow. And I think it's a really interesting talking point in and of itself of how you build experiences with the XC5 player and with our Series 5 going forward. And that really breaks down into a 3-step workflow of first defining your physical screens to match the physical space of what your screens are, where they are, how they're positioned, how they're oriented. More importantly, the number of screens, because you have the option on the XC5 to go from a single screen all the way up to 4 screens and all the various layouts and permutations of that. So, and we'll dig into this more and more as we go through these experiences. So really it's about establishing your physical screens first, and then laying out how you want your content to map into those screens. So really, really interesting. And it's a really easy workflow to understand and get into. So for this purpose, of course, we're going to do a single screen. This is going to be a landscape oriented screen because that's how we have this 8K example screen set up. Now in the upper right corner, we can choose the output resolution of this screen. In this example, I am going to restrict this to 1920 by 1080 just artificially, but just know that you can go all the way up to 7680 by 4320, so 8K resolution on this single screen. So incredibly powerful. And again, I'm not going to dare do this over a webinar, so we'll keep it simple. Now, step 2, once you've established the screen, is of course to accommodate for any bezel compensation. So for this one, we are not. This is a single screen, 0 bezel. We're going to go ahead and make sure to zero that out. Step 2 is to define the layout of how you want to divide this screen into zones, if that's something you want to do. This is classic, Bright Author Connected, Bright Author workflow. Same kind of concept here, but now we can establish a zone of content that we want to go into this screen space. And for that, I'm going to do a basic video. So we're going to do something really, really simple here to start. I'm going to use this as my local library folder. We can make this zone a video or an image. We'll go ahead and make it a video. Again, it's 1920 by 1080 as the resolution. And then we'll drop in a single video into that. So from here, what we're going to do is actually save and then publish this to get this content out to the player. We'll go ahead and save this presentation. And then we're going to pick our XC4055 single 8K screen. We'll send this out. And then there we go. So we will use our imagination that that's actually 8K. And you can imagine this kind of content, really fine details of the skiers going down the mountain slope that would look super impressive on a giant 8K screen. So again, just one of the possibilities of what you can do with the XC4055. But I want to actually move on here and get to some more advanced stuff. So building on that idea, let's go from a single screen output to a multi-screen output. So for this one, what I'd like to do is take a look in here at an example where you could use these screens for a menu board. So QSR, quick serve restaurant, multi-screen menu board, that type of application. So for this one, we're going to do a 4-screen landscape presentation build, again with the XC4055. And in this case, we're going to use all 4 of those screens. So again, we'll start here with our concession stand demo. Go ahead and choose our destination folder. And I'm going to do a couple of new things as part of this build. So we're going to again use 4 screens in landscape. And this time I do want to actually use bezel compensation. So if we look at our physical space that we've got going on here, there are actual bezels that are part of this physical build. So if we look at the screen space, we've got these outer bezels, we've got this inner region of the screen. If you look here, really, really tiny on the screen. But if you look at this leading edge here, we've actually got, if I can get Zoom to actually draw it this small. Yeah, that's way too small. So if you actually look at the edges of the screens here, this real estate is the actual content area that we want to work with. And I need to account for that gap, or that physical chassis of the screen, and make sure that my content can actually flow properly and seamlessly across these screens. So in Bright Author Connected, we will actually put in that bezel compensation as part of it. So I know from the actual measurements that these screens are 1250 wide. These are going to be 760 millimeters. And then for each of these screens, what I'm going to do is actually account for the bezels in between the screens. So we can actually put these in one screen at a time. I know for a fact that these are 47. And we do have a question that just came in, which is perfect timing for the next one. I think someone is asking if I can create overlapping zones or set negative bezel compensation. We will definitely get into that. So hold that question. I think we'll answer that coming up. So we're going to go ahead and set the bezel compensation here. For this screen, it's going to be 47 here on this side. And then we're going to do 47 on that side and this side. And you can see we're just kind of mirroring this physical space that we've got. And then when we get to the last screen, we just want this inside bezel. The outside we're going to leave alone. So outside bezels not accounted for, inside bezels we are accounting for. And then what we're going to do is actually make sure that we've got this size set for all of our screens. Make sure I've got this going here. If you don't do this, then your content doesn't exactly flow seamlessly across these screens. Now, the example that I'm going to build here, it's not as critically important to do this, but when you want to start flowing this content seamlessly, which we will in some of these later demos, this becomes really important. The other thing that happens is once we've established this bezel compensation, this actually starts to inform how you build your content, which I think is another really important aspect of this, because we are looking at 4 landscape screens that are 1920 by 1080 in my build example. And you would think that your content should actually be 1920 times 4 across this total width. But now that we've actually established the bezel compensation, that has an impact on our content. That actually means that our content needs to come in a little bit larger. And you don't actually have to do the math. The math is being done for us. Under the layout settings, we can see that my total content size is now 8,112 pixels by 1080. So if I did want to create a single zone that spans across this this, arrangement of screens, I now have the numbers and know what the content requirements are going to be. So I think it's really interesting to come into the software and actually take a look at this, map out your screens and your bezels and all those things to match your physical space, and really get a good idea of what that content is supposed to look like. So got all these set. Now what I'm going to do is drop in some content into these screens. And for this one, I'm going to actually use the different screens to show different content. So if you look at this view, we're actually looking at the layout portion of this. You can see that we have these overlays. We have some layout boundaries, which now represent the physical spacing of these screens, the physical arrangement. And this gives me the opportunity to start laying out my content into zones. So under the navigator, I can add zones. If you've used Bright Author Connected before, this is the same process. We can start to draw these boxes of zones out. If I wanted something seamless here, I could span this across, or I could individually address, each screen on its own. And you can see the gaps in between that represent those bezels. So for this demo, I'm going to do a couple of things here. I'm going to do some flanking video zones on the left and the right. And we're going to push this one over here. So we're going to do 2 video zones here. And then in the middle, I'm going to do kind of a mixed media. We're going to do an image zone here that's going to be HTML-based content for our menu boards. Because I think if you're going to do menu boards, you probably want that data to be, or that experience to be more data-driven, dynamic. So this is the layout. This is how I want those zones to work and actually map to these screens. So let's drop in some content here. Go out to our menu board folder. And I'm going to grab a video here for a burger. We'll put that one on the left. And then over here on the right, let's do a soft drink. And then here in the middle on these 2 zones, what we're going to do is actually drop in our HTML content. So this is actually content that's coming from Screen Feed Connect. So I'm using their dashboard to actually build a dynamic application, which is going to serve our menu board. So this is something that's it's not just a static image, it's actually a real live application. So we're going to do a menu board there, and then we'll drop in an HTML widget here. And we'll grab one more URL. We'll point this HTML widget to that one. And that should do it. So let's go ahead and save this, and we'll send this over to our XC4055. With any luck, see these things pop in, and there we go. So bezel comps looking good. Everything flows in those screens exactly how we wanted it to. So just an example, multi-screen, wide landscape layout, mixed media, different types of content. So I think that's a great example of something you can do there. So let's continue from that one. The next one that I want to go through is actually going to build on this even more so. We are going to stick with this theme of using multiple screens, but in this case, what I'm actually going to do is a multiplayer multi-screen video wall. So in the example of needing to use screens that are actually beyond just what the 4 screens are on an XC4055, let's say you wanted to use 5 or 6 or even 8 screens, you would need a way to actually address all of those outputs and combine multiple players in order to create a seamless experience. So that's what we're going to do next. I'm going to get this player reset and set up. So let's push into this example. So we've got our 4055 coming back online here. And this is what I want to do next, is actually build a 3x2 video wall application. Now my left portion of this video wall, the 2x2, those left 4 screens are going to be an XC4055 using the 4 HDMI outputs. And the right 2 screens, top and bottom, are actually going to be driven by an XC2055. So what I'm going to do is actually combine those 2 players together and to create a single seamless video wall experience. Now, you could do this as a a mixed media, multi-zone type presentation, same way we did the menu boards. But you could also do this as seamless video. So you can actually span a single video content across all 6 screens and use those 2 players in a synchronized manner. And that's actually nothing new to BrightSign. We've been doing that for a long time. But now you can take that concept and use it on the XC5 players and really open this up to the number of screens that you can work with. So let's dig in and actually start to build this. So let's do our video wall demo. Again, we're going to set the location for this one. And we're going to build the left side first. So let me go ahead and actually specify that this is our left. And we're going to use the XC4055 for those left 4 screens. So I'm going to go ahead and hit start here. I'm going to choose the screen count as 4, and this is going to be 2 by 2. So as we look at this, I'm targeting that left portion 2 by 2. So each of these are going to be 1920 by 1080 for this demonstration. And for the layout, I'm going to do kind of a mixed media content blend as well. So for actually what I need to do first, we're going to go 0 bezel on these because this is one of those seamless video walls. We don't want to see any bezels. Let's clear that out. Okay. So now we have nice seamless content running here. I'm going to do an image zone here in the upper left. We're going to do an image zone in the lower left. And I'm going to use HTML content for these 2. And then what I want to do here in this section on these 2 physical screens is we're going to span video that goes across these 2. So this will cover the left portion of my video wall, 4 screens. First zone first, let's go in here and actually drop in some HTML content. I actually want this to be a clock. So we're going to, again, pull something from screen feed. They have really great dynamic applications. So we're going to drop this into this zone. Then we're going to go into our bottom zone here, and I'm going to do a live calendar. So we're going to actually show our current calendar linked up to a real calendar system. So again, HTML content, we're going to make use of that in both of these zones. And then right here on this zone that spans screens, we're going to drop in a video. So let's go ahead and push this out to our XC4055. We can see this starting to snap in here. So there we go. We've got 2/3 rather of our video wall built here. So we've got some HTML content, some images, some videos. Good start to it. So let's actually finish this off and get our 2055 rolling. So we'll do a new presentation. We'll do video wall demo right. And of course we will choose the 2055 as the other option. So we'll go ahead and start that. And of course we have the screen count is either 1 or 2. So you can choose up to 2 screens, and then we'll choose the layout that we want. And I want actually this. So 2 landscape screens that are stacked. Again, 0 bezel on these for seamless content. And we will come into our layout here. We can use an image or video zone, doesn't really matter because I'm going to use HTML content here as well. So we'll drop in an HTML widget, and I will grab, you probably have guessed, another screen feed widget. I do like them a lot. And then we will push this to the 2055. And there we go. So that's our 3x2, 2 different players. And again, you can do this any way you want. You can do content in zones that correspond to the physical panels of this video wall if you really wanted to. You could do a single zone video content that you synchronize, across. Now, in this case, there are 2 separate players. They're 2 separate presentations. So of course, that requires 2 separate pieces of content. But for video, you can absolutely synchronize those and make it seamless.
John,
lots and lots of possibilities.
Interrupt real quick. We've got a question whilst you've got it in here. Jamie's asked, how would he do a video spanning all 6 screens in the current example?
Video spanning all 6 screens. Okay, so the way that would work is you would still do 2 presentations the way that I've set them up, right? So the XC4055 is handling the 4, screens on the left portion, and then the 2055 handles the 2 on the right portion. If you had a single video that you wanted to span, all 6 screens, you have to first start by cutting that video into 2 pieces. One piece of the video belongs to the XC4055 and its 4 screens. The other piece of the video belongs to the 2055 and its 2 screens. And this is actually consistent with how the video wall sync on our players has always worked, right? So for each player, that represents a video file. So you would need to first know what your total resolution is for the 6 screens, and that's your starting resolution of your content. You slice your content into your 2 pieces, and then in Bright Author Connected, when you're building your content, you would actually establish the zones the same way that I've done here. So this zone on the 2055 would be the rightmost piece of that video. And then as part of the programming, when you put these 2 presentations together, there's specific event and command logic that you build into the presentation that makes them communicate with each other, the 2 players that is, and that's what provides the synchronization. So there's a little bit more programming involved than what I'm just doing here. I'm doing a basic playlist build. So when you do synchronized video wall projects like this, you do have to turn on the toggle interactive, and then you start building an event-driven process-based presentation. So we have got actually some resources that show you how to build video walls. So once you see those, that's how that applies. That's how that works.
Good answer. Yeah, I like that, John. We'll get those examples out after this anyway, so people can see how we do the synchronization. That's great.
Definitely. I do actually, believe it or not, I actually have a demo of a 3x2 with seamless content. So, we could probably provide that as follow-up resources just to show people what that looks like, what that workflow is. All right, so moving right along, what I want to do next, this is going to get a little more interesting. So what I want to do is show you an example of, and I'm actually going to blank out and reset my screens here just to make sure we get this set up correctly. I want to go through and show you an example of a retail type experience, a kiosk, if you will, that really starts to combine some other interesting technologies and capabilities of what this player can, or what these players can do. So let's actually push in here. And what we've got in this example is a retail lift and learn type experience that I want to build. And for this one, again, we're going to use multiple screens on the XC4055. These are going to be, of course, in portrait orientation. But we got a couple other things that we need to contend with. So number one, we've already talked a little bit about this concept of bezel compensation. So here we still have our bezels so that you can see, right there, we've got this frame or this chassis that goes around the screen itself. But we've also got a gap. So there's spacing that occurs between these screens. If I wanted to, I could actually create content that spans seamlessly across all 4 of these screens and take into account that physical spacing or that gap between them. And I can do that again with the bezel compensation. I can treat that air gap, if you will, as actual bezels. And you can do the math. I've got the numbers and I can actually punch that in. And when I create that content, I can make that seamlessly flow across all of those screens. So the other thing that I want to do is actually introduce an interactive component to this. I want to make this an actual lift and learn experience. I want to pick a product up off the shelf and make that affect my content as well. So for this one, what I'm actually going to do is go through a build that's been done, just because it takes a little bit of time to make these. And I want to step through how this kind of project was created. So we're going to go into our retail experience project. And let's first take a look at our screens. So again, we choose the screens as the first part of this layout. We have 4 screens in portrait orientation. And you can see that I've got my numbers in here for my bezel compensation. And the way that this was done, you kind of have a choice here. It doesn't really matter which way you go, but the way that I've accounted for this is I've done the math to figure out the frame dimensions of the screen, and I know the total spacing across between the screens and including this chassis. You could actually consider, this bezel to be part of the first screen, or you could split the difference and then just divide it between the two. So, and that's actually what I did here, was just make this the bezels and the gaps as part of my presentation. So for each screen, I've got 157 millimeter gap. If I look at this one, I've got another 157. Between those two, screen 1 and screen 2, that's a total that represents the total spacing between them. So by setting all of this up, the reason that you might want to do this is, of course, to span content seamlessly across, so that it looks like the content flows across those screens and doesn't actually get pulled, and separated or smashed together. It's just a really, really disjointed sort of look. So in this case, I do want to do that. I'm actually going to show you what that looks like. We're going to create a layout here of a single zone of video. And that zone actually has a 2-state video. So inside of here, we've got 2 videos that we're going to show you. Each of these videos are 6,060 pixels across by 1920 in height. And this is the value that I was telling you about when you actually set up your screen space and you set up the bezel compensation. This tells you a lot about what your content needs to be. I laid all of this out, matched the physical space, and then got these numbers before I ever started my content build, because it was important for me to know that this was the number that I was targeting. It wasn't going to be, 1080 times 4 or 4320. There's a big difference between 4320 and 6060, of course. So this is really the magic number that I needed to have. And now when I created my video content in these zones, those are the dimensions of the videos. So these will actually span seamlessly across. You can see these huge gaps between the screens. And let's actually do this. Let me show you what this looks like here right out of the gates. So I don't need to save it. Let's fire this over to the 4055. All right, and there we go. So this is the first portion of the video. This is an attract loop that's been set up here. So this is kind of the beginning part of the experience. We're going to move from this into the interactive portion. But you can see here, this is a video that cleanly spans, across those screens and that gap. So bezel compensation is definitely a big deal if you have to account for it. For the next portion of this, the interactive portion, this is where the fun begins. What I've actually done here is set up. What I've actually done is I've crashed my Bright Author Connected. My poor computer does not like this. Stand by. All right, we'll let Bright Author Connected reload there. So what we've got going on here is connected to this XC4055, I've got a Nexmosphere sensor kit. So this is a USB connected controller from Nexmosphere, connected to USB Type A on the XC4055. This controller actually has a RFID sensor attached to it. And this RFID is something that you can use for a lift and learn type application. So what I'm going to do here is actually create, an interaction where I pick up a product off the shelf and I use that to change the content that I see on the screen. So as part of it, I need the actual product. So what we have here is our stand-in product, unopened. So we'll save that for later. We've got our NFC sticker that I've applied to the bottom of this. So this is the other corresponding piece, is that you need some sort of a tag that can be read by the RFID reader. So the idea, of course, is that I would place this within range of this RFID reader. Probably want to put this within the chassis and protect that reader there. So once you do that, then you can actually use this as an interaction point. So if I wanted to lift up this product, I can actually create an interaction. So by removing this bottle from the RFID reader, I've actually triggered this on-screen content for this specific product. So in this case, we've got, a different piece of content that we're addressing differently across the screens. Maybe we want to do some more product information. I've got a recipe video that's playing for this specific drink, all sorts of things like that. We can actually return back to our track loop state by returning the product here. And you can see that this is all seamlessly part of that content. So we can lift, learn about the product, and then place the product back. So the way that this is done in Bright Author Connected.
John, can I just interrupt you quickly there?
Go ahead.
I just wanted to say to people that are out here that we're doing, a single experience with an RFID lift and learn, but with our partners, we can do things which are motion driven or motion on present sensors. We have Wi-Fi pickup sensors. We do gesture control. We can do content based on age and gender. And we also have a new voice application. So there's many ways that you could interact with this lift and learn, voice and learn, or motion detection. So, and it all can be built in exactly the same way. But I just wanted to mention that there are other triggers available.
Yep, absolutely. That's a good call, because it really all starts with, at least with Nexmosphere in particular, right? So with their ecosystem, it's all about these controllers. So this specific controller is something that can do LED lighting as outputs. It's got inputs here for sensors. This RFID just happens to be one of many, many sensors. So, once you've got a controller in place connected to the player, communicating on its data protocol, really the sensors are kind of limitless here. So this could be just as easily motion. Like you said, you can combine motion to establish one state of content and then move into a lift and learn with RFID. Lots and lots of possibilities. So this just happens to be the one example that I've got here. So the way that it all comes together in Bright Author Connected, I did a very simple 2-state. So an attract loop as my main video, and then my lift and learn video. And they're all driven from events that occur from the Nexmosphere controller RFID sensor. I'm listening for serial data that comes across the player for the pickup portion. And then for this portion, I'm listening for a return to the RFID. And as Paul said, the build is exactly the same, regardless of which sensor or which technology you're using. It's really these same building blocks. It's establishing the states of your content and listening for these various events. And again, all of this is running on the XC4055. You can run this on any BrightSign player for that matter. But it's a really cool experience to be able to take advantage of the multi-screen and actually start, thinking bigger about your content in ways that you can do this. So that's what I have for this example. And so this actually wraps up our main demos that I wanted to show with the 4055. I think these are, really just scratching the surface, if you will, of what's possible. We're doing really simple content, really simple builds for things, using multiple screens, using interactive sensors, those sorts of things. I mean, it's really, like I said, just kind of the beginnings of what you can do with this. Anything you want to add to this, Paul?
Well, I'm just looking at the questions that are coming through, and there may be some, it could be one of the same question, I'm not sure, but one of the questions is that some people are using older screens that crop out the output. Is there an easy way to compensate for that using this product?
Crop out the output. I'm not sure I'm following.
No, I maybe Craig can rephrase the question, put it in an email to me and we can answer that. But there's also one about creating overlap zones or set a negative bezel compensation. I think this is more to do with projection blending and soft edge blending.
Yeah. I believe you can. You can certainly overlap zones. No doubt. I mean, you can absolutely do that. So any of the zones that I created, I was actually snapping those to screen boundaries or edges. But yeah, you can certainly layer zones. That's very commonly done thing. So image zones, for example, if you were using transparent PNGs, you could lay that on top of videos. So yeah, there's lots of possibilities there.
Yeah, exactly. There's been some stuff going in about content and WebGL, and people are asking about the HTML5 performance, because we've mentioned it a lot at the beginning, and they're kind of saying, well, what does it give us above and beyond than what we currently have? And I think we've got an example that we can dive into now and just kind of show off that WebGL experience.
I think we have one more thing. Yep.
Oh,
We
look
actually
at
had
that.
time.
It's as if you weren't prepared there.
I wasn't sure if we'd have time. We actually ended up with time, which is amazing. I must have gone through that way too fast, but yes, can't wait to get to this one. So when it comes to HTML performance, when it comes to working with content, I think this is a huge part of it. The ability to use more advanced, sophisticated HTML type applications. I mean, what I've shown you here today are really, really simple examples of just as basic HTML, CSS, JavaScript applications, right? But WebGL is something entirely new and different, and this is really a new medium, if you will. If you're working with images and videos, this is statically generated content. You can do a lot of interesting things in HTML, no doubt, but with WebGL, it really opens up a lot more possibilities. So our XC line in particular does an amazing job of working with WebGL. And I actually want to show you that here today because I have a really cool example that illustrates how that works. And I do need to connect. I'm going to connect a touch screen to this so I can actually interact with it and show you what that looks like. So again, with WebGL, this is 3D generated content. So we're going to actually do a demonstration here on the 4055. I'm going to do this as a single screen. Zero bezel on this one. We're going to do our layout, and I'm going to drop in an HTML5 widget. And what I've got here is a URL. And this is something anyone can actually look at themselves. This is something that's public on the web. This is a demonstration of some WebGL content that's been done by a company that makes software. They make an actual creative suite that you can use to create WebGL content. So it's kind of an example of what their platform can do, which I think is really amazing. And it happens to run really, really well on our XC4055. So let's actually send this over and take a look at it. Oops. There we go. All right, so this is loading. We're actually going to cache preload this in. And here we go. So what we're looking at is an example of a product configurator, right? So this is just one of the things that you can do with a WebGL type experience. This is touch interactive driven. And as the end user, I am in control of this experience. So I'm moving the camera, I can rotate the product, I can move this around. I can do all sorts of interactions with it. And this to me is what's really exciting about this medium, this type of content, is that it's very different than your statically generated videos and images and those sorts of things. It's just so much more immersive and interactive. So for example, I can configure anything I want about this product. It's the Verge 3D scooter, but we all know it's a Vespa. Of course, we need to make it purple because it has to be purple. You can go through this and actually set every single little detail about this, to your liking. So we can make that a carbon fiber. We can come in here and configure the wheels. And all of this is being dynamically generated. It's procedurally generated because it's a 3D application, that's been turned into a web application. This is running natively on the 4055. Incredibly smooth, great overall experience. And depending on how much detail you want to put in, I mean, it just kind of draws you in because I want to look at every single option and feature and all the things that you can do with this product, right? So it's just a great example of what's possible. So
And just to add
This
to that,
is
John, this is kind of what we were saying at the top of the show. It's kind of real world these days. Digital signage has moved on a lot. I get questions about what's coming next, and we see a lot of this now in the automotive market is kind of where this sits. But we see a lot of stuff in retail or even hospitality. This is kind of the next generation of digital signage, and this is the future that we're trying to paint for everybody. It's is it coming? I think it's here already. It's not mainstream yet, but the more that we can advise you guys now, the more you're going to be ready to be able to do these applications. We had quite a few questions about content. Brightsign is a great manufacturer of products, and there are people out there that do fantastic content. If you're an integrator and you don't have those skills in-house, you can drop me a line, or you can look on our website, and we have lots and lots of people that can help just with the content side of things. So don't let this kind of stuff scare you off, because I think it is definitely next generation, and we've definitely got the people in the right place to help. Sorry, John.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. No, and those are good points, because it's, there's so many ways that something like this could be leveraged, and the other thing to keep in mind is that all of the stuff that we've shown you, up to and including this point, can be combined. So if you really wanted to create, a 3D WebGL based interactive product configurator and blend that in with a physical interaction like you did with the Nextmosphere Lift and Learn, with buttons and sensors and lighting, you absolutely can. And all of those things are getting combined onto our platform. So, this is a web application at the end of the day. It's HTML and JavaScript like anything else. So you could blend in the Nextmosphere buttons and sensors. You could, incorporate videos and static assets. You could do layered zones. You could do all of the things that we showed you and put all of those pieces together. So just really, really exciting potential, for creativity.
Really good stuff there, John.
All right. So I think, do we want to go through questions? We actually ended pretty quick. I'm impressed. I thought we would go way over, but
no, you done pretty good on there. I've answered a lot of the questions during the session. There's a few that I need to take offline. So if I haven't answered your question, I've made a note of it, and I'll be taking it around. But I just had a question from Stephen, who was saying that he's got a current job with a augmented Google Maps, and he's using the current XT Series 4, but the rendering is coming a little bit too slow, and he's just asking whether the performance would be better on the XC5 series. I absolutely know the answer to that is going to be a yes.
yep.
I mean, the difference in performance, you might have to refresh my memory here, John, but I think it's 4 times as fast as the current 4 series on the XC5.
Yeah, I mean, those kind of numbers, it always depends, right? It depends on what the content is, what you're comparing, apples to apples. I know that when it comes to WebGL, there's, a monumental increase from a Series 4 to an XC5. The maps question is actually really interesting, because there are a lot of different ways to approach it. The XC5 certainly, would be a great option. I've actually used some mapping utilities, some JavaScript libraries for map tiles, even on something as low as an LS. So really, it kind of depends on the content, kind of depends on what you're trying to build. But if you are trying to do something that's multi-touch, if it's using WebGL to render that out, then definitely the XC5 is the way to go.
Just a real quick one, the difference between the XC2055 and the XC4055, in terms of the WebGL engine, they are different, right?
Slightly different. I don't know that I have any numbers on what makes them different. I think practically speaking, for example, this demonstration I could run on the 2055 or the 4055, and I don't notice a single difference. So
I'm pretty sure on the spec sheet it's double in the 4055. So it's going to come down to application. We're running something quite heavy here, so I think we're pretty good on both models.
Right.
Still questions coming in. Can the multi-screen video wall mode be used in Bright Author and not connected?
So multi-screen, I believe, is a no on Bright Author. Bright Author being classic, like the older application.
Yeah, I know that the The XC range is supported, but in the 8K mode and not the multi-screen video mode. I think that's correct.
Right. Yeah. So keep the questions coming in if you have them.
There's a lot more specific about how much traffic does the box generate per day when no other app is running. So any background noise for data traffic.
Depends on how you set it up. So if the XC5, like all bright signs, it's running BrightSign OS. It's got connectivity to bsn.cloud if you choose to provision it that way. So some of that will depend on whether you're actually using bsn.cloud, and it depends on the content delivery. If you're using a CMS partner platform, then that question really is going to be unique to that CMS and how much synchronization or check-in is occurring there. I think we have some published docs on how much data our bsn.cloud content cloud uses. Very, very, very minimal. I mean, if you're just using the players in the mode that I was using today for local file networking, all the content push is done locally on my local network, and the player is just simply checking into bsn.cloud for health and status updates. So very, very tiny amounts of traffic.
Yeah, that is good. I've just had a question come in, and I got asked it the other day, and I'm still waiting for the answer. But I don't know if you've had any experience yet, John, but does this player support 120 hertz?
I don't know the answer to that as well. That's an interesting one. I don't.
I'm waiting for the product manager to come back to me and say stuff on that. So Craig, I'll get back to you on that, but it's an open question that we had already. That's a good one.
I think there's a question about, is it possible to play videos with alpha channel? And I don't think the answer to that is, I don't believe so. WebM was one of the formats that I'm familiar with that has transparency. So at this very moment, I don't believe that's the case. But I think that is another one Paul will probably want to check in and see if there's any plans to support that.
Yeah, I'm making a note of all of these. Well, it's coming to 5 minutes before we can just kind of keep the floor open. If anyone has any questions, just put it in the chat now. We'll leave it open for another couple of minutes, but I think that's a really good demo there, John. I really appreciate all your time on that. So just to recap to everyone of what you kind of saw today, it was all about the XC4055 and the 2055. We've showed you how we could do 8K digital signage. We've done some video walls using one player, the 4055, and then we used a larger video wall where we had the 4055 and 2055 on the same 3x2. And we also showed you the interactive with the lift and learn. So that was an RFID experience, but as we already mentioned, that could be in any kind of motion sensor, presence sensor, Wi-Fi pickup sensor. We can put gender and age recognition, those types of things in there as well. And we just looked at the WebGeo application. So I'm hoping that we've kind of covered pretty much everything that we wanted to today, but I'm sure there's going to be a lot of questions. A lot of you people out there are going to start to buy this and use it, but hopefully we've really kind of opened up your world a little bit and shown you something that you can do with these players. The questions have now stopped, so I guess we're kind of just about done, unless you've got any final comments, John.
No, I think that sums it up really well. I think for my part, I'm really excited to see what people do with this. I think it's got a lot of creative potential, a lot of possibilities, and that's what excites me the most, is just seeing how people use this. That's the big thing.
Exactly. And you creative people out there, if you're doing lots and lots of work, just remember the bright side. We love a case study. This is a new player, so if you're doing a new deployment, it doesn't really matter what the deployment is, but we like to hear from you to know how the success is going, and we can do some PR with you and make sure that we can hit the news headlines, all that kind of stuff. So we're here for your support. So check in from time to time. You've got our details, and we've got these questions. We will send out the link for the recording of this and the answers to all of the questions soon after. So I'd like to thank you all for joining us today, and thank you, John, for being the BrightSign pilot for the day.
Absolutely. Thank you.
And guys, we will check you on the next one.
All right. Bye, everyone.
Thanks, guys.